Have you ever found a single photograph that made you realize your entire childhood was actually a beautifully staged crime scene? My name is Chloe, and for 26 years, I believed I was the luckiest girl in the world. My parents, David and Alina, were the it couple of our small town. He was the high school principal, she was the librarian, and I was their golden daughter. We had Sunday brunches, a house that smelled like vanilla and old books, and a family history that was as clean as a bleached sheet. But 3 weeks ago, while I was helping my dad renovate the guest bedroom for his retirement, I dropped a heavy crowbar and cracked a loose floorboard near the radiator. Inside wasn't insulation or dust. It was a small velvet-lined box containing 12 Polaroids and a newspaper clipping from 1998 that changed the DNA of my reality. The clipping was a missing persons report for a 3-year-old girl named Maya from a city 4 states away. I looked at the grainy black and white photo of the toddler and felt a cold, oily sensation wash over me because the girl had a tiny heart-shaped birthmark on her left temple, exactly where mine is. I started flipping through the Polaroids and my heart stopped. They weren't photos of me growing up, they were photos of my parents in their 20s, looking frantic, standing in a basement that looked nothing like our house. In the background of one photo, there was a woman tied to a chair, her face bruised but her eyes fixed on the camera with a look of pure agonizing defiance. That woman was my biological mother. My parents hadn't adopted me from an agency like they told me. They had taken me as a replacement after my mom, a former colleague of theirs, supposedly died in a car accident that never actually happened. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Every I love you from Alina, every bedtime story David read me, every sacrifice they made for my education, it was all built on the foundation of a kidnapping and a cover-up. I realized then that my mom wasn't a librarian because she loved books. She was a librarian because it gave her access to public records she could delete. My dad wasn't a principal because he loved kids, he was a principal because it gave him the power to forge my school transcripts and birth certificates from scratch. I was a ghost they had raised in a gilded cage. I confronted them that night at dinner, laying the Polaroids out next to the roast chicken. Alina didn't scream or cry, she just took a sip of her wine, looked me dead in the eye and said, "We gave you a better life than that woman ever could have. She was a mess, Chloe. We saved you from a life of struggle." But the emotional twist that truly broke me came when I tracked down the location of that basement. It wasn't in another state, it was under the very garage I'd played in for 2 decades. I went out there with a sledgehammer while they were asleep and found the hidden hatch. Inside wasn't a torture chamber anymore, it was a shrine. My biological mother hadn't died in 1998. The journals I found in a footlocker revealed she had been kept down there for 3 years, forced to train Alina on how to be me, what my favorite foods were, how I liked to be tucked in, what my first words were. They had kept her alive just long enough to ensure the transition was seamless, and then according to the final entry, they let her go. I realized then that my perfect life was a script written in my real mother's blood. The shocking ending, I didn't go to the police right away. I realized that if I turned them in, I'd lose the only life I knew, but if I stayed, I was an accomplice. So I invited my biological father, the man they told me was a deadbeat but who had actually spent 20 years in prison for a crime my parents framed him for, to the house for a surprise dinner. I sat him down across from David and Alina and watched their faces turn the color of ash as he laid a hand on my shoulder. I didn't have to say a word. I just walked out the front door, got into my car, and drove away as the police sirens finally began to wail in the distance. My parents are now facing life in prison, and I'm spending my weekends at a cemetery 4 states away, finally visiting a grave that has my real name on it. I'm finally free, but every time I see a heart-shaped birthmark in a mirror, I don't see a miracle. I see a survivor of a family that was never really mine.